Most of what I've been involved in over the last, say, 20 or so years has been about trying to instill the ethic of sustainability into practice, into the planning and urban development work that I do, translating it from a big sort of hairy sort of concept from that into practical realities, if you like, practical demonstrations. So that's a very fluid and dynamic way of thinking about the threats that facing any particularly urban systems, which is the sort of context in urban communities. How to actually deal with that in the changing sort of economic and social environment. The Stirling City Centre project is a project that's basically working across all of the relevant government agencies, the Department of Planning and Infrastructure, the Main Roads Department, the Public Transport Authority, the City of Stirling, Landcorp, the Land Development Agency, and a number of other entities. And we'd been working on that project for 12 or 18 months, and it had basically got stuck in an ideological battle between the sort of planners and the transport, particularly the road transport people, because of different headspace, if you want to call it, different paradigms, and we needed a way to move forward that would recognise, the different values that were trying to be exhibited in the plans we were making for the area, as well as trying to bring the community forward through that process as well. I mean, it is really, really a big challenge, particularly in big government context, in government agencies, government state-owned corporations, water systems, electricity systems, all of those sort of things. It is a real challenge because what I've observed over the last 20 or so years is a lot of, if you like, lock-in or institutional inertia or even technological inertia of particular patterns and ways of doing stuff. So I guess what I've been looking at from a theoretical point of view is this notion of transition management. And one way of describing the sorts of things you need in that context is this notion that within any bureaucracy or sets of bureaucracy, there will always be the sort of rigid structures. You need to actually acknowledge that those structures of normal organisational hierarchy and those sort of things are there for a purpose. They keep that system together. But in that context, trying to cultivate the opportunity for what's often referred to as enabling leadership. That sort of creates the niche or the holding pattern that allows people to get together, inside the structure of the more formal structures, to actually get on with, coming up with a creative solution. That's the sort of, I suppose, the theoretical organisational sort of way of thinking that's sort of come to me over the last while. It's pointless bashing your head against the existing structures, but you've got to find opportunities within organisations for that sort of enabling environment to be created. Through a series of conversations with people that were sort of outside the project at the beginning of this year, was this notion of using an alliance approach. A little light bulb that went off was this approach that comes essentially out of the construction methodology, which is about creating an organisational culture that is about delivering a particular facility, infrastructure, whatever it might be, to take the cultural learning out of that and apply it in the planning process, which is essentially the notion of creating this supportive environment or holding environment for people to work in a creative way to come up with a creative set of solutions. And we've actually worked through and got a large way down the track of solving some problems that haven't been solved for 20 or 30 years. How big a freeway will be, will a road be a freeway, or will it be a more modest road? How much public transport will be included? How big would the city centre be? Community starting to get on board with what we're trying to take forward in that context. One of the things I try to do, and it's very difficult to do, is to not come across when I'm working with the community as a professional so-called expert or whatever. It's more about trying to be a facilitator, with some expert knowledge. So I suppose the way I like to work in that context is about how to actually, provide the knowledge content you have into community processes that help to try and actually bring the community along, with a particular project or process in mind. So I guess the notion of, building up real trust with those, with the stakeholders and the partners involved in a process, and working through many of the challenging things, because often there will be pockets of NIMBYism or whatever else that may be very important to that particular part of the community or whatever, but it may not necessarily be part of the a solution for the bigger picture. So we've sort of lucked into taking experience from different parts of these organisations, putting them in this holding environment, using the language of an alliance, creatively trying to push through. And we've been, like no other project I've worked on, been talking about this theoretical concept of self-organising approach, of creating a supportive and a holding pattern, recognising and talking about that it is a very complex problem. It's not just a complicated problem where we're all in our disciplines, and also putting some resources to documenting the learning as we go through that process. So it's very unique in that sense. So what we've done is said that when we're working on that project, we're working for the Alliance. We're not actually working for the agencies we might have come from, or the firms that we've come from. We've set up a separate office, and most of the people that are directly involved are working on it part-time at the moment because they've got other responsibilities, but when they're working on the project, they're largely working on the project from that office. One of the steps in the process was undertaking a 3-day training program using what's referred to as the 7 habits of highly effective people. So part of that was team building, getting people to know each other. Part of it was creating a language coming from that 7 habits, things like putting first things first, having the end in mind, acknowledging other people's points of view, and finding a behavioural approach. So that's been, I suppose, a way of building a culture, a team culture, that's more so than any other project I've been involved in as well. I certainly believe that there's a role and a market and opportunities to build and design projects in this sort of way, and I think it's part of the way for the future in terms of bringing talented people together, finding that supportive environment to come up with the concept, come up with a solution. The real challenge moving forward, though, will be about how it is institutionalised back into the different parent agencies, if you like, and that is essentially why we're doing this knowledge capture stuff. There's a formal administrative structure with a board represented by all the senior people across the various agencies and the local government, and the structure of the actual project team, which is referred to as an alliance leadership team. So we've got a formal structure, and hopefully the learnings out of that will go back up into the the hierarchy, if you like, and the project type and the learnings, the lessons learned will be applied in other projects into the future. What often drives people in these sort of areas is this dissatisfaction, if you like, and that there is some stuff to be fixed in the world, if you like. Rather than just call it dissatisfaction, this notion that comes from a book by Paul Hawken, this notion of blessed unrest. This is unrest, this thing in your gut that is an unrest, but it's blessed. You're blessed with the opportunity, if you like. That's one way of putting it, to actually go and play in the world with the thing that you're passionate about, to try and move it forward and fix it. So I guess I suppose that's become a bit of an underlying philosophical, or a way of describing a driver, if you like, a personal driver.